just want them to be successful and happy. I think that's my major goal for him, is to be able to stand on his own 2 feet one day and be able to add to society.
That they're happy, healthy, and taken care of.
Mine would be just to enjoy it. Be happy. Don't do anything you feel uncomfortable with or you don't think you're going to enjoy. Just try things, really.
I think most people want their kids to grow up, to have a decent job, succeed in life, be a leader.
I want my children to be happy. I want them to be self-sufficient. Because I don't want to pay for them anymore.
To hope that they do end up going to college or learn something good for the rest of their lives where they have a good job and they're stable.
They would have ethics, good morals, that they would love God more than anything, and that they would have a good education. I think that was the most important thing for me.
Success, of course. My goal is to see him successful in school, in his personal life.
I think there's so much opportunity in the world today. I see people really wanting their kids to have as much as they can.
My guess is, as a parent, you have goals for your life. In fact, perhaps all your life, you've been setting goals for yourself and doing whatever it took to achieve those goals. As we did the research among revolutionary parents, we found that the same thing was operative. They set goals for their children as well. Now, when you think about setting goals for kids, it's a pretty big playing field that you have to address. You got goals related to relationships, to academic performance, to their health, to athletics, to economics and finance, to their lifestyle choices, and on and on and on. The question comes back to you, though, is, so what are the goals that you've set for your children? See, I would recommend that no matter what kind of goals you decide you want to set, that you really put your greatest emphasis upon the two areas that are ultimately going to matter the most. Goals related to your child's faith and goals related to their character. Now, when we look even more deeply at our research, you have to keep in mind that we focus on a specific kind of person that we were talking to. Young adults, people in their 20s, whom we defined as revolutionaries. And what that meant is that, number one, God is their top priority in their life. Number two, it meant that their faith is very important in their life. They couldn't imagine living their life without faith at the center of it. Thirdly, they possessed a way of looking at the world such that everything came back to their views of Scripture, a biblical worldview, if you will. Fourthly, they had determined that their purpose in life was that they would love God with all their heart, mind, strength, and soul, as Scripture exhorts us to. And fifthly, they were active in a faith community. Now, as you're thinking about your children and the kinds of goals that you want to set for them, my question is, how do those particular outcomes relate to the goals that you're thinking about? See, it's not easy to raise children to honor God. It's not easy to raise good citizens in our country. It's not easy to raise the kind of children that you may envision in your mind. It's a huge job. In fact, this really is a battle that you're immersing yourself in. It's a battle for the hearts and the minds and the souls of our children. And so if you're going to be effective as a parent, you've really got to enter the fray with tremendous courage and purpose and with very clear priorities. To me, the good news out of all of this research that we conducted, though, is that the revolutionary parents that we talked to, not just the children that they raised, but the parents themselves, were probably no different at all from you and from me. They're just average people, if you will, and I don't mean to put them down by saying that, because they did an extraordinary job in raising their children. But God is able to use any person whose heart is really committed to Him, who are dedicated to doing the kinds of tasks that it takes to raise a spiritual champion. I don't know about you, but I go back to that research, and as depressing as it was sometimes to realize how far off the mark I was as a parent, I've been able to cling to the realization that these people are no different than me. If they can do it, I can do it too. So as we get ready to enter this next session in the workbook, I'd ask you a few questions to be thinking about as you get ready to jump into it. The first of those questions is, honestly, What difference does your faith make to you? Is it a real difference maker in your life? A related question is, what difference could your faith make to you if you really devoted more of yourself to being a dynamic person of God, someone whose very purpose in life related solely to His purpose for your life? What would that look like? And thirdly, what would a spiritually mature child be? If you think ahead a number of years and try to figure out what your children could be like, what it is that you want to do to try to have some of these specific outcomes, what would that look like? What is a spiritually mature child? Think about those things, maybe even talk about them a little bit with your spouse, and then get into that next session. I think it'll give you some enlightenment in relation to those very questions. Well, I hope by this time you've had a chance to begin thinking about the kinds of goals that you want to set for your children. You know, you need to have some kind of a theme or anchor to build those around. And I guess the question comes back to you, what's the theme or anchor that you've chosen for your children? Now, I know everybody's different. You may have a different approach than others, and that's fine. But let me suggest one particular theme that you might build around, and that's the theme of transformation. I know a lot of people have a lot of different ideas about what they want to accomplish with their children, and I just want to say that I think God's perspective is that He wants your children to be transformed to be solely like His Son, Jesus. So the goals that you should be setting really shouldn't emphasize things like survival and success and intelligence and health and popularity and even things like being religious. I mean, all those things are fine and good and they have a place, but again, make sure that you major on the majors, that you emphasize the things that matter the most. As you're pondering what kind of goals to set for your kids, think about your own journey through life. I mean, you've been around for a few decades, you've learned some things, you picked some things up. What has God done in your life to help you become a transformed person, to help you become a spiritual champion? See, and then you can start to maybe work backwards and think through, now, how do I translate that into my children's life? And even another question related to that, what are some of the things that I've experienced or that I've become or have done in the past that I don't want to be part of my kids' lives? See, our research among revolutionaries showed that there was an emphasis upon 7 different things that we called the passions of revolutionaries. And these were 7 different dimensions of their faith life that they blended together into a well-knit whole that gave them a dynamic faith. These were things related to worship and evangelism and discipleship, stewardship, service, being part of a dynamic community of believers, investing in their own family. Those 7 things together, built on the principles that God has given to us, enabled them to really become spiritual champions. But there were goals related to each of those areas. Maybe that's another way that you want to think about this or design that for your own kids. All of it, though, ultimately comes back to what many people call the Great Commandment: loving God with all your heart, mind, strength, and soul. How do you foster that in the lives of your children? You see, if you build that as the foundation around which everything else happens, you've got a strong foundation to build on. Think about what you're trying to do as a parent as being part of your service to God, where you're trying to raise these children up to truly respect and honor Him and bring glory to Him. Recognize that as you do these things, as your service to God, you alone are not responsible for the results. God is also involved in that process. So as you think about goals and outcomes, let me just leave you with a few questions to ponder. You know, one of those, I think maybe the most important question might be, if your child turned out like you, is that ideal? Is that what you want? And maybe a related question is, if you think about building a solid faith as a family business, the family business that you have, where do you want your successors to take that business? Think about the answers to those questions.